I'm Noah Abrams, and welcome to The Days Between, the show where I talk to my friends, people I admire, and people I want to better understand about success, failure, happiness, and misery, as well as all the other elements that make up a life well lived. Along the way, we'll look at mental, spiritual, and physical health, and when life didn't go as planned, the steps they took to get themselves from A to B and beyond. This week, I'm speaking with Duane Sorenson. As a coffee roaster, Duane's passion forever changed the world of specialty coffee. Having grown up in a small town in western Washington, it was a love of music that first led him through the doors of a local coffee shop in the 9th grade. Encouraged by his father, Duane's ability to differentiate varietals began to emerge. By the time he left high school, Duane was a barista. Naturally competitive, he immersed himself in Seattle's coffee scene in the early 90s, working multiple jobs and refining his technique. When an opportunity to learn to roast coffee presented itself, Duane dove in head first, and within a few months was roasting full-time. It was a source trip to Panama and a desire to work directly with farmers that inspired what would become Stumptown Coffee, and at the same time set in motion a movement known as the Third Wave. With his goals accomplished and his company having grown to meteoric heights, Duane sold Stumptown, a decision that was not without speculation or consequence. After opening a series of acclaimed restaurants in his beloved Portland, Duane is back on the roaster with his new venture, Puff Coffee. During the course of our conversation, we discuss his preference for hiring employees with passion over experience, taking care of people, and why success is a naughty word. It is my pleasure to present Duane Sorenson on The Days Between. I am here in Portland, Oregon with Duane Sorenson. You are very much identified with Portland, but you're not from here.
No, I'm from outside Tacoma, a town called Puyallup.
Tell me about growing up in Puyallup.
Spent a lot of time by myself alone because of the church or religion my parents were involved with or in Pentecostal. Yeah, a lot of talking about burning in hell. Couldn't listen to rock and roll, so it was a lot of rules, a lot of can't do's, and that was kind of a struggle as a kid because I really loved music. And my cousin Robbie moved into my room. I think he was 16. I was probably 9. I remember it being the best summer as a kid because when he moved in his record player and AC/DC record collection and blew my mind. You know, my parents wanted him to have his things and have the transition, getting kicked out of his house to be, you know, as smooth as it can be. So they allowed the rock in the house, and it was fucking awesome. I remember him kicking open the door, and he just started putting up like Rush posters and AC/DC posters and like taking down all the Jesus like posters or like pictures that my mom put up in my room. And it was awesome. I didn't look at it as rebellion as a kid, but it was, you know, just that excitement. Like, you know, the rules were changed, and it was like also freedom. You know, we felt free for once. You know, the church there was a lot of rules. It was fucking hard, like growing up in that environment. Hearing like every step you do, you're in a burning hell. You know, I couldn't do anything right, and you know, no one could.
When did you get into skateboarding?
I got into skateboarding in the 7th grade. That's when I left the church. I finally had the courage, and it took me months to get the courage to tell my parents that I wasn't going to go to church anymore. When I did that, when I told them I wasn't going to go to church anymore, and it was easier than I thought or expected the conversation to go. But then I just jumped right into punk rock, and I don't know why, but it wasn't really popular in Puyallup. There's only a couple punk rockers, but fucking, I had this freedom. I wasn't in church anymore. I could listen to what music I wanted to listen to. But yeah, music was the first thing that I wanted to get my hands on. Punk rock was the thing for me, man. And then skateboarding. And I had so much energy, but skateboarding was not a long-lived passion or thing for me. Only really, like, I busted my foot on a launch ramp in the 7th or 8th grade. It was the 8th grade. I had a cast, and I was gifted by my size and my strength. I did really well in sports. I hated, like, you know, the jocks. I always hung out with the weirdos, you know, and the weirdos, the artists, you know. But I was, you know, I did really well in sports. I I was very successful in sports because of, my body size, but I'm still the smallest Sorenson boy. It's kind of weird, but it was maybe ninth grade. Yeah, there was this espresso bar, coffee bar that opened up in Puyallup called Bertoloni Brothers. And I was just attracted to it because the vibe was cool. I'd never seen anything like it. I've never been to a coffee shop. They were playing their own music and like there was girls and guys going in there and hanging out. And the vibe was cool. It was like before that, people hung out in fucking McDonald's or Godfather's or, Hoagie's Corner or some shit. But like, this was just different, it just felt different. And Puyallup, the weirdos were always hung out there, drinking coffee, the punkers and the artists. And I always hung out with those folks and, the creatives. And because of the music they listened to, I thought was more interesting than the stuff that was on the radio. And just, they were just more interesting people to me, Then I started drinking the coffees. Anyway, what happened is I was drinking Kenyan coffee and Ethiopian coffee and Colombian coffee every day. Like I was able to tell the difference, and I really got an interest in it because of my dad's a sausage maker, and he, would encourage me and, taste things, like really into spices and crafts and, just even different type of proteins that were from different farms. He would talk about it and share it. He was passionate about tasting things and recipes for sausage and, salami and salumi and cured meats. And it was before it was cool, I would take like a porchetta sandwich to school and be all embarrassed about it. But that's what I grew up in. My daddy was really passionate about it. And so I was really lucky to be encouraged to taste things. And so anyway, Bertoloni Brothers. Yeah, that was my first introduction to coffee and espresso bar or a cafe. But yeah, the vibe was cool. I couldn't believe that they could listen to any music that they wanted to. And it was nice, introduction to coffee and tasting different coffees and varietals. My first barista job in high school, I think I was a senior in high school. I worked at this coffee bar in Tacoma called Shaka Bra. And it was cool. I just loved making coffee and like interacting with people. And I was there for a couple months. And then I graduated from high school and I got the hell out of Puyallup and moved to Seattle. And that was a great time being in Seattle in the 90s as a barista. I would go to different coffee bars that were doing special things like hearts on lattes. And no one was doing that back in the early 90s. And I'm very competitive on myself, or a very competitive person. I push myself probably too hard. I take on more than I can chew a lot. But anyway, I was working 4 or 5 jobs, going to college. I was having the time of my life. It was awesome. Like making great money as a barista, going to college, just, seeing shows. It was a cool time to live in Seattle. There was a bunch of cool shows and bands going on. And then I was working at this cart called Solstice up in Seattle. And this guy who we were buying coffee from, he's leaving the company that he was working for, who was bought by Starbucks later on. But anyway, he's opened up a small little roastery. And I was just like fucking fanatical at that point about coffee. I wanted to just, all my time I was reading about coffee. I was going to coffee bars, all over town on my breaks and my lunch breaks and my time off. Just, seeing different techniques that baristas were doing with steaming milk or pulling shots or just tasting different espresso blends. It was a really awesome time to be in Seattle for at least, espresso and music and craft beer was happening.
Is that when you started roasting?
Yeah, that's when I started roasting. I started roasting at Lighthouse. That's the guy that he was opening, I was mentioning. His name was Ed. I said, hey, I want to learn how to roast coffee. He's like, well, just show up. And I showed up every day. And I would go to work as a barista, but I'd show up every day, every morning. And he was surprised, like, fuck, this guy wants to learn how to roast coffee. He's showing up. So I think after a couple of months of me showing up every day and teaching me and showing me different things about the roaster, and I think after about a month, I was on the roaster roasting the coffee and, getting critiques. And then I think it was 2 months or 3 months into it, my apprenticeship, I got a job there as the roaster there. And it was fucking awesome, man. I had a little tiny 5 kilo roaster, and my girlfriend, who became my wife at the time, was going to medical school. We lived right behind the roastery. I couldn't believe it. I was making $30,000 a year, and I felt like I was a millionaire. I had everything I needed and I wanted. Yeah, I miss those days. Those were cool.
I've heard a story that you had $8,000 saved for a house and you bought a roaster instead.
Yeah, it was like $8,400 that my wife at the time, I grew up together with her since junior high. And we were living in San Diego. We moved to San Diego from Seattle just to get out of the Northwest, because we've been in the Northwest our entire lives. Just wanted to get out. Had job opportunities in San Diego to be a roaster at a company down there. And went down to San Diego, and it just fucking sucked. Like, it was such a drag. Like, the people and the commute, like, just, it was totally, like, the only cool thing about it was surfing. I was able to surf every day, and we had a cool little beach cabin that was like paper thin walls, but it was just like, it was awesome. We were living like we wanted to, and it was great. We both had jobs. We were making more money than we could wrap our minds around, which was only like, $40,000 or something like that. But it was like, fucking, what are we gonna do with all this money? It was awesome. And then I was getting discouraged. I didn't want to live in San Diego. We wanted to move back to the Northwest. We didn't want to move to Seattle. We were tired of Seattle because of, the growth that it was going through. And this is the mid to late 90s. So we decided on Portland. Or we were going to open up Stumptown in San Francisco. That was our first pick. And we bought this roaster with the money that we had saved for a down payment for a house, like $8,400 or whatever. Put it all on the roaster. The guy said, make me an offer. I was like, well, what do we have in the bank? So I just wrote him a check for what we had in the bank for this little tiny Probat roaster that we started Stumptown on, which is still, I think, around. Cool little machine. But yeah, we spent our savings on a roaster, and we were going to put it in San Francisco next to a buddy's bar called the Toronado on Haight Street. And it just seemed like more than we wanted to deal with, like just the city and like the cost. And then we visited Portland, and we just fell in love with Portland. Like, we just didn't think twice about San Francisco. It was like, we knew Portland, from kids. I would come to Portland as a junior high and high school to see shows. It seemed like all the cool punk shows were going through Portland, and then I'd go to I wouldn't go up to Seattle. I would turn off to go to Boise or something. So Portland had this cool music scene that I got to know Portland by coming down and skating. There's skate parks everywhere, but Burnside was the only thing around. There was nothing in Washington. So we'd come down and hang out at Burnside and see a punk show at the Meow Meow or something like that. This is, in the late 80s. And then Portland reminded us of Seattle in the early days before Amazon and Microsoft and all that kind of blew up and changed Seattle quite a bit, for, good and bad, but we just needed to change. So we moved to Portland and found a building or a spot on Division Street. This is in 1999, January, February 99. Found a spot, old salon called the Hairbender. That's what I ended up naming our espresso blend at Stumptown, the Hairbender.
What was Southeast Division like?
It was a commuter street, definitely like blue collar working, young families were starting to move in. It was, it was a blue collar working class, young families were able to move in there. But it's changed, over the last 20 years a little bit, well, maybe more than a little bit, but it's busier. There's more people. Similar, I think, it's not as working class. It's a little more professional, as far as the people that are living there. Those people that are moving in there now, are not welders and plumbers and that sort of thing. They're more professional, doctors and architects and that kind of thing. So it's, it's definitely changed a little bit.
What was the response of the neighborhood when you came in?
I was getting teased a lot, people saying Portland doesn't need another coffee bar. When I moved into Portland to open up Stumptown, it had more coffee bars per capita than anywhere in the U.S. I didn't know that. I had no business plan. I was just confident that at that point in time that I knew how to roast coffee and I knew how to make espresso coffee and steam milk pretty good. And with that confidence and that knowledge, I just, I had no idea when I was in my 20s that I was going to start my own company. I was just planning on being an employee and working for someone and clocking in and clocking out. And so that was kind of a trip.
Well, you told Bon Appetit in 2013, I wanted to take care of people, make them happy, even if that was making really badass coffee.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I'm wired, is taking care of people. I take care of people. I don't take care of myself very well. I'm starting to. I'm getting better the last few years. I've getting old, so my body hurts. So I've been more conscious, taking care of myself more, but I'm still taking care of people. I'm wired that way. It's kind of a blessing and a curse. I just, without thinking, I'm helping someone get in the car, open up the door, and I chose a profession that I get to help people every day. It's pretty fucking awesome. And I don't know if I went into or sought after like being into coffee for helping people. It just kind of, it's one of the reasons why, but everything just kind of came together, like, coincidence. And I started Stumptown because there was no coffee company at the time that was doing what I wanted to do, which was working with farmers that have small farms and, getting their coffee. Because at that time, mid 90s and the late 90s, it was all getting blended together. And I went to Central America in the mid 90s, my first coffee trip. And I started going around to these farms, and their farms were just fucking beautiful. They looked like little gardens. And then their neighbor's farm was maybe 3 times the size, and their plants didn't look as good. I was like, well, how can we just like work a deal and like get your coffee after we tasted it, of course. And it was better than the neighbor's coffee. And he's just like, well, it was too much work to keep it separate. Like it all went to a central mill and got blended in. I was like, that was the big inspiration of like starting or doing something that wasn't done before, and no coffee companies were like pushing it. Or I've always had a big heart. And this trip to Panama that I took in, I think it was 95, and really like, opened up my eyes. I was roasting coffee for Lighthouse at the time. Maybe it was 96. I don't know, 95, 96. But I went to Panama and I was tasting these coffees that taste like fucking Fruit Loops and Apple Jacks. And I was like, what is this? I was young and I was tasting coffee with all these coffee buyers from Pete's, and Starbucks was there, all these big names. I was just 24, 25, 26 years old. Just like, didn't know anything about coffee. I was just like blown away, like tasting some of these coffees from some of these farms, but we couldn't get them. We couldn't have access to them because it was too much work to separate or put, their 5 bags or their 10 bags or their 15 bags separate. So it all got blended in to like the central where everyone's coffee went. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand how much work could it be like to like keep this farm's coffee like separate than because it tastes like fucking Fruit Loops. It did. I remember it. It tastes like juicy fruit and Fruit Loops. This coffee. I was like, how can we keep this coffee? Like, who's buying this coffee? He was like, oh, it's just for this cupping. It's like a sample. It's going to this mill. Like, this coffee is fucking the best coffee I've ever tasted in my life. How I couldn't understand why all these coffee professionals, exporters were there, and coffee buyers were there from Starbucks, and Pete's were there. Why would they not keep it or want to keep it separate? And just like the general reaction that I got from everyone is just like, it's just too much work. It costs too much to keep it separate, But now that's the game now. Everyone, is keeping coffee separate and separated, and that's the thing now. It's not a big deal. It was only 25 years ago that it was like, no, you cannot do this. You can't keep this awesome coffee separate. So that was the main inspiration for starting Stumptown, like working with farmers and like getting this fucking awesome coffees so we could roast it up and serve it and provide it for our customers or people who want to get some freaky coffee, and they should get rewarded and paid for it as well. They're having to work for it. So that's the important thing with direct trade and visiting the producer, taking their story and what they need to survive and, making it happen. Like getting people excited about their coffee. It's such an inexpensive luxury. It's still, you hear about these bags that are $100 a pound, but you could get a fucking best cup of coffee for $2. And it's like the best part of so many people's lives. like a $2 cup of coffee. Like I've had seriously over hundreds of people tell me like that the cup of coffee that they bought from me or my store or from one of my customers is the best thing of their life. That's really fucking heavy. And, I got to share that with my employees to let them know like the coffee that they're making is like the best part of someone's day. That's pretty fucking heavy, and I take it very seriously. I'm really happy that I could make someone's day better, life better, for a lot of people. It's a fucking drag, Life does suck for a lot of people, and a cup of coffee could be the best part of someone's day. But the people that we hire and that we have working with us at Puff also like have that spirit. They want to push themselves. And, most of the people that we hire don't have much coffee experience, if any. They're just passionate people. I look for like passionate people and people who are artistic or musicians or artists or crafts people, but like are crazy nuts about what they do. Because when he makes the coffee, I'll be able to like share or relate with them more.
November 1st, 1999, Stumptown opens. 5 years later, in 2004, Stumptown broke the world record for the highest price paid to a grower for beans. And you've mentioned the ethics of fair trade and how important that was to you.
Direct trade.
Yep. Tell me about bikes to Rwanda.
I guess it started when I went to Rwanda for the first time. Blew my mind. It was really a time in my life that changed my life and opened up my eyes. I've had different things going through life but that was powerful. Like, I don't know how long after the genocide was, but there was like, you definitely seen it, you'd seen all the prisoners like walking, all of the same clothes, and they murdered their neighbors. And like, it was such a fucking trip seeing all that death. But Rwanda is such a beautiful country. It's just one of the most beautiful countries I've ever been to. And the people that I talked to and met there were beautiful and kind and peaceful. And I couldn't understand how like they could kill 1 million people with machetes in 2 months. I was there for probably 2 or 3 weeks this first trip, and I was just going through it. Like every day when I woke up, we'd go to the coffee fields and, we'd see hundreds of dead bodies like on the way. So it was heavy. Getting back to the bikes to Rwanda question, like the whole trip to Rwanda was just so heavy. It was just so heavy on my heart, my mind, and like, what could we do more besides pay the best price for Rwanda coffee? What could we do besides teach how to like taste coffee? So if they know how to taste coffee, we could communicate better so they could work together, improving the quality of their coffee so they could get better prices. But like, when I was asking all these people, producers, coffee farmers, and people in the villages around, like, what could we do more? What could Duane do? What could Stumptown do more for these people? And everyone said bicycles. They would make these wooden bikes with wooden wheels to move their coffee to the washing station. And it just like flashed and sparked this idea to like, I'm going to go back to Portland, rally some people together. Because at the time, most of the people that I hired at the roastery that were production were all bike messengers. So we had bikes in our blood, and to get the Stumptown staff rallied up about getting bikes or getting donated bikes together or building bikes to send to Rwanda was like easy. And Portland jumped on it too because it's such a bike town. But then we started this nonprofit, Bikes to Rwanda. And then I started it to get bikes to coffee farmers and coffee pickers to get their coffee to washing stations fast. And it was an awesome idea. And we got a lot of fucking bikes there. And when I go to Rwanda, I was there a few years ago, seeing the bikes, they're still around. People are using them, and it's cool. They're using them as taxis, and they're using them, these bikes that we sent there. So it was a really good, positive thing that just kind of puttered out for various reasons, but it's making their lives easier in transportation. They're getting the coffee to the washing stations a lot faster with the bikes. And yeah,
So you mentioned hiring employees that don't necessarily have as much experience with coffee, but are passionate about their art in their personal lives. Tell me about the culture and branding around Stumptown.
When we started Stumptown, it seemed like every employee that we had or that we hired were in Portland bands. And I didn't hire people with coffee experience for a reason, because back then in 2001, 2002, like the coffee experience and the training was, people weren't trained like they are now. And, people are trained much better now thanks to companies like Stumptown and Intelligentsia, because our training department, that was also part of our success, is coffee was just okay. The specialty coffee roasters, they usually sucked. Like, no one knew how to make espresso there. And it seemed like the independents were like, that's where the magic was happening. The culture of Stumptown was just like what I was into and what I'm into. And, like when we did marketing stuff, we letter pressed it. It was expensive, but I liked the printing of it, like how it looked on the paper. And we were able to do it because we were selling lots of coffee. People were excited about what we were doing, and they were excited about the coffee and the taste of the coffee. And we're doing hearts on lattes and flowers, rosettas, all that stuff. No, that was not happening in Portland. So that was part of the success. Just the culture of Stumptown was Portland. It was nothing new and unique as a company culture. It was Portland. And it's weird talking about Stumptown because, it's a dream or something. I'm so disconnected from Stumptown. So it's weird kind of talking about it now and the culture, because the culture is so different at Stumptown now than it was.
So in 2008, you packed up a U-Haul and moved to New York, lived in an apartment with 3 employees, your wife at the time, and a kid. What was the reason to move to New York?
There was a couple of reasons. I stopped in New York a couple of times on my way to Africa just to check it out. And I had an interview with Food and Wine magazine. So on my way to Africa, I would stop in New York, and just because I've never been, I'm from the small town of Puyallup. And I guess the first time I went to New York was 2004. And it blew my mind, just like going to the big city. But I couldn't find a good coffee anywhere. And I'd ask, like, I'd go to restaurants that the fanciest meals, and the food was killer, and the restaurants were great that we were visiting, but like the coffee sucked, and there was no good coffee bars. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Like, there was no good coffee. Like, there was none. I couldn't find it. And on my third trip, just all the recommendations, I would ask all the food people and the chef people, and there was no good coffee. And it just blew my mind. Like, I get it every once in a while. I don't know if it's an excuse that I'm using or to do something I want, but like I felt the need to we got to help these people. We got to get them good coffee. And, thinking about it now, it's probably an excuse just because I wanted to go to New York. So I used it like, we got to help these people get good coffee. And we were so successful at the time, people were just freaking out about Stumptown, like all over the West Coast and everywhere we were serving it. People were just, the reception and they were getting was awesome. And so we had, our egos were big, and we had confidence that, we could make coffee anywhere, and at the same time, we had the opportunity to open up a coffee bar in the Ace Hotel, because we had a coffee bar in the Ace Hotel in Portland, and it was going really well. And so, that opportunity helped, and seemed like it was the right time. We didn't have the money for it because we just opened up Seattle. So we were pretty drained, and moving to New York seemed like an impossible thing to do, but we just worked hard and we put it together, and it changed Stumptown. Like, it just totally changed the game. And that's when I also decided, like, I'm out, at that point in time, I had 4 kids. I had 3 kids and 1 on the way. And we were in every restaurant that we wanted to be in. in New York and Portland and, the cities that we're in. And I was just like, I wasn't tired, but I was just like, I couldn't think of like any other goals that I wanted to do. Like, I felt like I just do the same shit every day, like going to meetings and fucking, taking pictures with people and like trying to smile. And it was a drag. I just wanted out, and I was just very crazy and overwhelming. Like I was selling bags of coffee on the airplane on my way from Portland to New York.
New York Magazine in 2009 published an article that was entitled "The Messiah Hails from Portland," and it discusses how you would interview potential vendors and you had no problem saying no to people that you didn't want to sell your coffee.
Yep.
And that you would require any vendor to go through barista training as well as a 3-hour class that included a PowerPoint presentation and videos about the farms and where you sourced from. Did you ever feel like that passion was misinterpreted?
Well, everything can be misinterpreted and usually is. And people's interpretation means less to me now than it did. Yeah, I mean, why we required training and barista training, and we did it for free back then, is to ensure that our coffee is going to taste good. So we protect the brand and the quality of our coffee and the quality of the farms we're working with. But also, if they just go take the class, they're going to make better coffee and they're going to make more money. And if someone refuses it, then we didn't want to work with them because we didn't want our coffee tasting like shit. And a lot of people wanted to serve Stumptown just for the sign because it was so popular. People would see the Stumptown sign or recognize Stumptown and they would go there. And people, a lot of people wanted to just serve Stumptown because it was popular and there was lines out the door. And so, yeah, it was difficult at times saying no to people, but mostly because of the people made it difficult. They couldn't understand that, we were helping them. We're wanting them to sell more coffee. And if they refuse that help, then, we can't help them.
In May of 2011, Esquire magazine published an article called "The End of Stumptown, America's Hippest Coffee Brand," which speculated on the sale of Stumptown and likened the social impact to the death of Kurt Cobain. What followed were several other articles and rumors and speculation, but there was never any official word from Stumptown at that point. Beyond business, for you, Duane, how did that feel to have a publication like that speculating on what you had created and likening it to the death of Kurt Cobain?
Yeah, well, but by then there's lots written about Duane and Stumptown, and some good, some bad, and like it's hard, reading even the good stuff. Like for me, because of my insecurities and how sensitive I was, and still am, but I've definitely got a lot thicker skin, and especially these days, like people are so vicious on the media and like online, and just it's almost, I don't know. I guess, yeah, reading that, it ruffled my feathers and it was a bummer. It was a drag. When we sold Stumptown, or when we brought on that investment, TSG, basically, selling a large portion of it. Yeah, I was just done. I had no other goals. All my employees had healthcare. It was before like healthcare was like mandatory, or like it was one of the first things I did before I took a paycheck. I made sure all my employees had healthcare when it was 2 employees. And it's always important to me. It always has been, to take care of people. And at that point, Stumptown was taking care of itself when we brought on this investment, and like it didn't need me. I also felt that I was probably maybe could hurt Stumptown in the way, like hold it back. It was bigger than I could control and manage. I didn't know where to go, what to do. It wasn't about the money, because I never had money, and access to money is weird, and it's been good and bad. But yeah, a lot of people said a lot of things about Duane and selling out, and it was hard. It's hard when people next to you at the bar like talking shit about, they don't know, they didn't know who I was, but they were like saying like, Duane the fucker, like, sold to the company, for all this money and, fuck him. And kind of like, I don't know, it just sucked. It hurt. Then I had this non-compete for 5 years and I didn't prepare myself or know what I was going to do or did think about it. I just like thinking about like getting out of Stumptown and like spending time with the kids or all that. And yeah, that I was a fucking train wreck. I had all this money and no one to talk to, and it was hard. It was awful. Money cannot buy happiness. What I love to do is roast coffee and make coffee for people. That's what I've been doing my entire life. And then when I couldn't do it anymore, and I couldn't find anything that I was really interested in to take up the time, like read books or go snowboarding or like golf. I was never into that. Never interested me. So,
well, you opened the Woodsman Tavern in 2011.
Yeah, that was what it was. It was fun.
And then a year later, Ava Jeans.
Uh-huh.
And then the year after that, Roman Candle, which was a pizzeria and bakery.
That's right.
And they were all basically right next door to Stumptown on Division.
The reason why I opened up those restaurants is I was inspired by, the time I spent in New York, the 3 years before that, and the food and the chefs I'm a purveyor. I roast coffee for restaurants and coffee bars. So I'm in restaurants and coffee bars all day long. And when I was in New York, just seeing the excitement in some of those kitchens and some of those dining rooms, I wanted to, share that or bring that back to Portland. And I've loved Portland. I've always been proud of Portland. And when we moved to New York, I was really proud that we're a Portland company. So when we brought on this money, this investment for Stumptown, I wanted to, of course, like being generous, I wanted to share this wealth with Portland. So I opened up 3 restaurants that I was inspired by New York and all the travels that I did. And Portland didn't have, I felt, that quality of, or it just didn't have that dining experience that I wanted to put on Division Street where I opened up Stumptown. And so it was kind of a giving back to the neighborhood and backfired on me, the restaurant business. And like, yeah, I'm thankful I don't own them anymore. God, that would be a fucking drag.
In 2012, GQ called the Woodsman Tavern one of the 10 best restaurants in the country. Stumptown was sold in 2015 to Pete's. A year later, Ava Jeans was sold. And then in 2018, Roman Candle quietly turned into Holiday.
Yeah.
And they changed the menu. It became plant-based. How much of that was a reflection of what was going on with you personally?
Yeah, totally. I was totally going through just, trying to feel better and live a healthier, sustainable lifestyle. So I got into, plant-based foods, and I wasn't passionate about having a bakery anymore. So I was like, well, fuck it. We'll stop making croissants and bread that I wasn't eating at the time because I cut out gluten. And I was like, well, if I'm not eating gluten, why do I have no business owning a bakery? And the reason why we opened up the bakery in the first place is to provide for Stumptown pastries, really awesome quality pastries that we weren't able to find here in Portland. And then Stumptown switched bakers on us. So that kind of was what it was. And it was like, I'm not passionate about baking or making croissants. We definitely hired people who were, and the product was amazing. But I was going through this plant-based food thing at the time, and we just tried it out. It was awesome. The food was awesome, and people loved it, but we just couldn't get the numbers to work. And I'm thankful for that too, because I'm not passionate about owning restaurants or running restaurants.
So you mentioned the non-compete when you sold your interest in Stumptown. Tell me about Puck Coffee.
Well, it's it's what I do. I roast coffee, and I love it. I love it so much. During my time away from the coffee roasting machine, after I sold Stumptown, it was a drag. All I wanted to do is like make coffee for people and roast coffee and go travel. And yeah, I guess I didn't understand like what an impact or, how much coffee is to me and is for me and part of my daily life. And Puff has definitely been so exciting for me. Yeah, I can't put it into words. It's been hard like holding back because of the non-compete that I had and like wanting to make coffee and do creative things like, just design a bag that looks unlike any other bag to put the coffee in, to set on the shelf. And Puff Coffee it's just a coffee company that is striving to make better coffee every day. Like we have a team that we want to get better every day and make better coffee, but also be better humans. We really like support each other and love each other. And it's a really cool environment or culture that we have at Puff. And it's not for everyone for sure. It's, we're some would say weirdos, we listen to weird music and loud music, and we got tattoos and color our hair and look at weird books. And yeah, just it's just because of what we're into and what we're interested in. And it's I don't have words for it yet. It's pretty amazing. It's like just seeing the response from people, and it gets me out of bed in the morning, like how powerful a cup of coffee can be and how it could like get someone through a day and get someone through a morning and get someone through a breakup or get someone through a, even good times. It's a powerful thing, and I cherish it, and I cherish what it means to people and what it gives to people. And I'm more excited about roasting coffee and making people coffee than I ever have been. Even when I started Stumptown, I don't know, it's maybe because I'm older or I've seen a lot of the world since I've opened up Stumptown.
How do you define success?
Success could be so different for so many different people. I kind of hate the word because people use it to like, you got to be successful, having a house, having a job, success is, I don't know if you could really find success. I think it's, I don't know, it's like a wheel. Like,
How do you define failure?
it's also another word. Like those two words are like kind of like bad words, naughty words. They're so harsh. Both of them. They're like they've been put on. No one. I don't know. To be successful causes a lot of stress in people, and being a failure. No one wants to be a failure or labeled a failure. I mean, and that's anyone could say anyone's a failure depending on like. I'm sure people think that I'm a failure, and I think I'm a failure at times, a lot of the times. But I want to do better every day. I just want to be a better person.
How do you define happiness?
I don't know if I know that happiness. I don't know if I know what happiness is. I hope to find it, someday. But I think I'll find it. I think I'm on a good track to find it. But like happiness, I don't know. That's another one I think I'm chasing. I'm trying to find happiness. I always try to find happiness. I've definitely been happy before, but I don't know if I could. I don't know if I've felt or been really truly happy because of myself. I'm my worst enemy. So, but it also is probably the reason why I've got ants in my pants where I do as much as I do, and because I don't know, I guess I'm never really satisfied with my work, or I feel like it always could be better.
What would you say to 18-year-old Duane?
18-year-old Duane, fuck, I don't know, man. Have fun. Yeah, try to find happiness and success. Don't be a failure. That's what I'd tell them, because it's all like bullshit anyway. People just got to figure it out. By going through life, and I don't think what I would say to an 18-year-old Duane would help this person, or I try not to give advice to people because I'm trying to figure it out myself. Like how to be a better boss and how to roast better coffee and how to be, better person and how to be a better dad, cat dad. But yeah.
How would you describe what you do for a living?
I'm a coffee roaster. I roast coffee. That's because that's what I'm doing right now. I'm roasting all the coffee at Puff. So I'm on the roaster like 40 hours a week, 40 to 50 hours a week. So I'm a coffee roaster for sure. I'm proud of it too. I love the craft. I love saying that I'm a coffee roaster.
Duane Sorenson, thank you for speaking with me.
I'm glad that we got together, man. This is cool.
The Days Between is a production of Noah Abrams Studio. Story editing by Andrew Henry. Mixing and mastering by Greg Henkin. Website and design by John Fisher. Theme music is by Evo. The Days Between can be found online at www.thedaysbetweenpodcast.com and on Instagram at The Days Between Podcast. My name is Noah Abrams. Thanks for listening.